PR. Promoting dialogue.
Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. ECOWAS calls for de-escalation in the crisis between Bamako and Algiers. In Nigeria, state governor cries out that Borno is losing ground to Boko Haram.
I want to call upon the Nigerian military, the armed forces especially, to put heads together with the police, DSS, civil defense and others to ensure that these criminals are dealt accordingly.
And the Continental Trade Body set to host African ministers of trade over U.S. tariff imposition.
We obviously will not be in a position to condone or support America first and everybody else last. We will pursue what is in Africa's best interests as we seek a path forward in respect of AGOA.
And Burkina Faso to receive $32 million in grant from the International Monetary Fund. So stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is a more edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to all of our listeners across the sub-region. Well, let's begin with the latest on the Mali-Algeria diplomatic debacle as the regional bloc ECOWAS is calling for de-escalation in the crisis between Algiers and Bamako, which is also involving Burkina Faso and Niger. In a statement, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, said it was concerned about this new diplomatic tension between the two countries. The exit from ECOWAS comes after the deployment of Malian soldiers on the border with Algeria. Christopher Ticho has a report on this.
In its statement issued on Wednesday, ECOWAS said it was following with concern the recent development in diplomatic tension between Algeria and Mali. The latest act to date is the closure of Algeria's airspace to Mali and Mali's airspace to Algeria. On behalf of the West African heads of states, the ECOWAS Commission expressed its deep concern about this new diplomatic crisis between Algiers and Bamako, which also involves Burkina Faso and Niger. These two member countries of the Confederation of Sahel States with Mali have taken a stand for the Malian Authority. ECOWAS calls on Mali and Algeria to de-escalate by promoting dialogue and using regional and continental mechanisms to resolve their differences. The exit from ECOWAS comes in the context of the deployment of Malian soldiers on the borders with Algeria. The Malian army says it is strengthening its position along the borders with Algeria. The decision was taken on Monday evening at the end of an emergency meeting of the government. As a reminder, Mali accuses the Algerian army of having shot down one of its drones in Tenzawalten, a locality bordering Algeria, and condemning the aggression and an unfriendly gesture by Algeria.
Christopher Ticho found that report was still on security matters, but in Nigeria's northeastern state of Borno, where the governor, Babagana Zulum, says Islamist group Boko Haram has renewed attacks and kidnappings in the northeastern state with little pushback from security forces, suggesting that authorities in the region were losing ground to insurgents. Militants from Boko Haram and its offshoot Islamic State West African province have mainly operated in the northeast of Nigeria, attacking security forces and civilians and killing and displacing tens of thousands of people. In the last few years, Nigeria's military had managed to push back against Boko Haram, while internal fight with ISWAP further weakened the group.
In this regard, the high-powered committee, which has been in existence for a long time, on illegal hotels and brothels, will soon be reconstituted to impose government policy on this subject matter. I want to call upon the Nigerian military, the armed forces especially, to put heads together with the police, DSS, civil defense and others to ensure that these criminals are dealt accordingly. And I believe some of them are not from Nigeria. We should work with immigration officials in order to deport some of them. Recently, we received over 300 or 500 from the Republic of Chad, from Borno State, from Nigeria, were deported because they are found wanting in their countries. We don't have any other problem in doing so. We shall very soon reconstitute the committee and see how we shall deal appropriately with the cases of illegal activities within the town. Otherwise, this would fuel another insurgency. We are also appealing to the federal government of Nigeria and the Nigerian military to do something about the Northeast, because right now we don't have single attack helicopter in Borno State. These attack helicopters were taken away from Borno State to the southwestern, northwestern states. We are not saying no. While trying to maintain law and order in northwestern state, they should also not be unmindful of the northeastern state.
Meanwhile, the Nigerian National Security Advisor NSA Malam Nuhu Ribadu has warned families of kidnapped victims against paying ransom to bandits. The NSA emphasized that such actions are counterproductive and only fuel the cycle of criminality. Ribadu made these remarks during a meeting with rescued victims in Abuja on Tuesday, where he commended the efforts of the military and security forces in the ongoing fight against insurgency. In a statement, Ribadu also took the opportunity to address the issue of ransom payment, urging Nigerians to stop funding criminal activities.
To talk to our people, please stop giving money to these people. It's one of the worst things that is happening. It's the most difficult thing we have faced. Many of these people, as you see them, their families have given money to these people, but it did not lead to their own release. No, it is we, the security forces, that have got them out. It's not the money that they are giving. These people, the more you give, the more you are compounding the problems for us. We have never given anybody a dime. We don't. And we don't want people to do so. Please stop it. Inadvertently, in the it may be helping this thing. And we are saying enough is enough. We will not be able to stop this thing quickly if people continue to give them money. I want to make a very strong appeal to all. It's understandable. When someone of yours is in captivity, you will do whatever it takes for you to get him back. But this is counterproductive.
The National Security Advisor Malam Nuhu Ribadu speaking there. Well, staying in Nigeria, 11 governors from the opposition People's Democratic Party (PDP) have approached the Supreme Court challenging what powers the president has to suspend the democratically elected governor of Rivers State, Siminalayi Fubara. The suit filed by the governors also challenged the declaration of emergency rule in Rivers State. Usman Marin Abuja reports.
While the media previously reported that the suit had been filed before the Supreme Court, the governor's suit was only filed before the Apex Court on Tuesday. The plaintiffs in the suit are Adamawa, Enugu, Osun, Oyo, Bauchi, Akwa Ibom, Plateau, Delta, Taraba, Zamfara and Bayelsa states. The plaintiffs, who filed the suit through their state attorney generals, predicated the summons on 8 grounds. They urged the Apex Court to determine if the president has the power to suspend a democratically elected structure of a state. The plaintiffs also asked the court to determine if the way and manner President Bola Tinubu pronounced the state of emergency declaration in Rivers State is not in contravention of the 1999 Constitution. Meanwhile, the respondents in the suit are to within 14 days after the service of summons on them inclusive of the day of such service cause an appearance to be entered for them. Recall Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu had in March declared a state of emergency in the oil-rich Rivers State and suspended the governor, his deputy and all lawmakers in the state parliament for 6 months following an escalation of political crisis. The declaration has received backlash from civil society organizations, pressure groups and political oppositions. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let's head to Ghana with more stories as the Minister of Communications, Digital Technology and Innovation, Samuel Nate George, has hinted on plans to improve network quality across the country. It says telecommunications companies whose services remain poor after 3 months will face steep fines from the National Communications Authority, NCA. Speaking at the press briefing in Accra on Wednesday, the minister said he had received numerous complaints from the public about the poor service delivery by mobile network operators. To address the issue, the minister now is the government's approval of additional spectrum and technology neutrality to aid the telcos in upgrading their networks. He also frowned at the destruction of telco infrastructures.
Legislation on fiber cuts, because the question now becomes, when the fiber is cut, they just cut it and they leave, and it comes back as cost to the telecom operators. And because the telecom operators are not descendants of Mother Teresa, they pass on that cost to the same Ghanaians, and we complain about the cost of data. because data can only come through fiber. And so when the fiber is cut, it affects our pricing, because in their model, they are always putting in a certain variable for fiber cuts, and we need to deal with it so that when roads are going to be constructed, they will get in touch with the regulator and the ministry to identify where fiber is laid, and then we can do the relocation of the fiber properly. I think that one of the things we'll do is keeping the designations of critical national information infrastructure and make it a criminal offense, irrespective of whether you are a road contractor or whether you are Ghana Water. If you cut fiber, you'll be criminally liable for cutting it. Because if you remember 3 years ago, when we had a triple fiber cut in the country on the same day, 70% of our country could not make phone calls. Imagine what that means for a country like this. Or when we had the subsea cable cut, what that did to us.
Samuel Nate George is Ghana's Minister of Communications, Digital Technology and Innovation. Now, Czech Republic President Petr Pavel continues his engagement with the Ghanaian community as part of a historic 3-day state visit to Ghana. Pavel's visit is the first by a Czech or former Czechoslovakia head of state in over 60 years. The leader of the Central European nation hopes to bolster bilateral relations and unlock new avenues for economic cooperation between Prague and Accra. However, during a discussion on Tuesday, President John Dramani Mahama voiced some concerns over recent U.S. tariff on African export, calling for more equitable global trade practices. WDL's Nadi Tete reports.
President Pavel, who landed in Accra on Tuesday following a 2-day stop in Mauritania, was officially received at the Jubilee House, the seat of Ghana's presidency. He later held bilateral talks with President John Dramani Mahama, where discussions focused on enhancing trade, investment and partnership in critical sectors such as energy, infrastructure, healthcare and education. During a joint press briefing, President Mahama described the recent 10% tariff imposed by the United States on Ghana and several other African nations as a move with very severe implications for the continent.
Ghana got slapped with 10%, which is the lowest in the tariffs that were rolled out. But a country like Lesotho got slapped with 46%. One of the largest contributors to Lesotho's economy is the trade and garments industry. Then you can be sure that it's going to affect a small country like Lesotho.
Meanwhile, Czech's President Petr Pavel also weighed in on the issue, calling on the United States to reconsider its trade strategy.
So in my view, it is really unfortunate to impose such a broad wave of tariffs without negotiating.
He urged Washington to adopt a more inclusive approach through constructive dialogue with its trade partners. As part of his visit, President Pavel is expected to participate in the opening of the Ghana-Czech Business Forum aimed at boosting private sector partnerships. He will also inaugurate the Czech House, a new cultural and diplomatic hub, and commission a hospital built by a Czech firm, signaling his country's growing commitment to development projects in Ghana. For WADR, Nadidi Tete, Accra.
In Guinea, the traditional and moral authorities of the Dakar region thanked General Mamadi Doumbouya for a pardon granted to Captain Musa Dadis Camara a week ago. He has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for crimes against humanity, the trial for the September 28, 2009 massacre. The traditional and moral authorities of the forest region declared his pardon as an act of reconciliation. However, such a statement suggests political issues behind the presidential pardon granted to Dadis Camara. Recall, Guinea is in an election year focused on the return to constitutional order. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal, and online at wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. ECOWAS calls for de-escalation in the crisis between Bamako and Algiers. In Nigeria, state governor cries out that Borno is losing ground to Boko Haram. Authorities in Ghana to sanction telcos with poor quality of service. And still ahead, Burkina Faso to receive $32 million in grant from the International Monetary Fund. We also have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Well, don't forget, we are streaming live on wadr.org, and we urge you to join our Facebook and YouTube live streaming. Now, the Burkinabe government is warning against publications on social networks that glorify terrorism. A communique to this effect was issued by the Minister of Security, Mahamudu Sana. Abdullah Hassan completes the story.
In the press release, Minister Mahamudu Sana notes the dissemination of malicious content on social networks in the form of writings, photos or videos promoting terrorism and conveying false information. The Minister of Security is referring to the latest terrorist attacks which took place in March in Zolenzo in the Bukul Dumuhun region and Japaga in the East region. According to him, the aim of these attacks is to undermine the morale of the fighting forces engaged in the reconquest of the territory and the consolidation of the liberated localities. They also aim to call into question the revolutionary momentum generated by the government and to manipulate public opinion. The memo points out that these acts constitute a threat to social peace and are punishable under Burkina Faso's penal code. Mahamudu Sana warns that these contents are already being investigated with a view to identifying and arresting the perpetrators. He then calls on Burkinabe to refrain from any acts of dissemination of false information or content promoting terrorism.
Abdullah Hassan voiced a report by our Ouagadougou correspondent Martin Kaba. In the meantime, the International Monetary Fund, IMF staff and Burkinabe authorities have reached a staff-level agreement on economic policies to conclude a third review of the program supported by the Extended Credit Facility ECF arrangement. Once the review is approved by IMF management and completed by the IMF Executive Board, Burkina Faso will have access to about $32 million in financing. Economic growth is estimated to have accelerated to 5% in 2024 despite a challenging security situation and tight financing conditions, and is expected to remain strong in 2025. Sakli Janko completes the story.
An International Monetary Fund IMF team led by Jaroslo Wegzorek, mission chief for Burkina Faso, held meetings in Ouagadougou during April 1 to 8 in the context of third review of Burkina Faso's 4-year Extended Credit Facility ECF program. The arrangement was approved by the IMF Executive Board on September 21, 2023 for a total amount of special drawing right of $228.76 million, about $302 million US. The conclusion of this review by the IMF Executive Board would enable the disbursement of about $32 million, SDR 24.1 million, bringing the total IMF financial support disbursed under the arrangement to $128 million, SDR 96.3 million. The meeting of the IMF Executive Board is tentatively scheduled for June 2025. According to the IMF team, despite a challenging humanitarian and security context, is estimated to have accelerated to 5% in 2025, driven by strong performance of agriculture and services. It added that economic activity is expected to remain robust in 2025, while inflation, which reached 4.2% in 2024, should recede to 3%. The IMF mission held meetings in Ouagadougou with the Minister of Economy, Finance and Perspective, Abubakar Nakanabo, the BCO National Director, Ahmad Badiel, and other government officials. The team also met with private sector representatives and development partners.
Sakle Jango found a report. Here in Senegal, the International Monetary Fund's mission to Dakar ended on Tuesday. For 2 days, an IMF delegation met with Senegalese authorities to discuss ways and means of securing new financing to restore the country's economic stability. IMF head of mission Abebe Amro Selassie spoke of constructive discussions following his meeting with President Bashir Diomaye Faye. The two men are considering measures to overcome the economic challenges facing Senegal following recent revelations by the Court of Auditors regarding the state of public finances. While the director of the IMF African Department has ruled out any financing plans for the time being, Senegal's Minister of Economy has stated that these discussions will ultimately lead to the signing of a new economic and financial program. However, the Bretton Woods institution is open to further discussions and already encourages the new Senegalese authorities' desire to restore budget transparency and fight corruption. Senegalese Minister of Economy and Finance are expected in Washington in the coming hours to meet with the IMF and the World Bank aimed at continuing negotiations for a new financing agreement. Well, recall the IMF suspended its financing program for Senegal worth more than 1 trillion CFA francs since September 2024. Meanwhile, African ministers of trade are meeting on April 14 to evaluate and propose measures to cushion the impact of the U.S. 10% baseline tariff on import into the American market. The African Continental Free Trade Area, after the world's largest free trade area, will host the forum in Ethiopia, with at least 51 of the 55 African nations affected by the new U.S. trade charges. The African Union AU also calls on President Trump to reconsider his latest economic policy. Francis Boniface has details in this report.
Describing President Trump's decision as a wake-up call, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Wamkele Mene, warns that Africa must act swiftly to reduce its dependence on external markets.
Combined with some of the trade instruments that we have introduced, as well as the overall liberalization objective of the AfCFTA, I believe that we are well positioned as a continent to turn this crisis into an opportunity.
According to the Secretariat, the tariffs could diminish the competitiveness of African goods in the U.S. market, affecting key export sectors such as textiles, agriculture, and manufacturing, among others, benefiting from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. The platform provides duty-free access to the U.S. for eligible African countries. Wamkele Mene emphasizes open and mutually beneficial negotiations.
We obviously will not be in a position to condone or support America first and everybody else last. That is not a partnership that is within the spirit of the MOU that we have with the United States. We will pursue what is in Africa's best interests as we seek a path forward in respect of AGOA.
As of February 2025, 48 African countries have ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, including Ghana, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire, slapped with the highest tariff in West Africa. Thus, the April 14 ministerial meeting will bring together policymakers, economists, and trade experts to discuss regional economic integration amid the global financial crisis. Faced with this situation, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, believes in building strong ties rather than erecting trade barriers, urging the American president to reconsider his decision.
Francis Boniface reporting there.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, let's further that conversation on after as to evaluate and propose measures to mitigate the impact of the U.S. 10% baseline tariffs on import into the American market. Now, the African Continental Free Trade Area, after the world's largest free trade area, will host the forum in Ethiopia. Our guest is Evans Nuno, a Ghanaian economist who provides economic analysis about the importance of the pending meeting.
As a continent, we are supposed to have that common forum for trade. And I have been saying that America under Trump doesn't seem to respect treaties and agreements, because most African countries have agreement with America by way of AGOA, that is Africa Growth and Opportunity Agreement. By that agreement, some selected African countries that are having good democracies are supposed to export their commodities to America without any serious hitches. And that has been an agreement. It was renewed last year. In September, it would expire. We have to go and have a review. Trump did not respect this agreement. He just hit us with 10% tariffs. So I think that the meeting is a step in the right direction.
Of course, step in the right direction. In that case, considering the implications of the U.S. decision, what should be the focus of this meeting of the trade ministers?
Yes, their meeting should be on how to get better markets, more friendly markets for our exports. And I would recommend that we strengthen the Africa Free Trade Area itself so that we can trade among ourselves. If we do that, demand for our export will go up and we can have better terms of trade. And also, we have to look at ways of improving upon our exports. The focus must also be on how to switch from this export of raw materials to improved commodities. If it is cocoa, we can add a touch to it. I mean, we can send the butter or whatever it is so that we can get actual good value for our export. And more so, if we're able to improve upon the quality of our export, we are likely to have people develop that strong preference for our export, and that will give us some inelastic demand for our commodities.
And talking about AFTA, does it have the capacity to negotiate trade agreements on behalf of Africa and improve, regional trade like the EU does for all European countries?
Africa has more than what it takes to negotiate for better trading conditions. Look, if it's about one country, then you may be weak. But if it's the whole Africa, the whole of Africa coming together to negotiate, trust me, we have the muscle, the trade muscle, to have good conditions for ourselves. So I think that Africa as a continent has more than what it takes to have better negotiations this time around.
There have been similar meetings of regional leaders to address challenges of regional trade in Africa, yet the impact of those discussions have not been felt. What difference will this meeting make in addressing the situation?
Okay, so the strategy of the West has been that when Africa decides, they also come in with a way to disintegrate the decision. For example, this AGUA, this agreement with US.
And it's time for sport news. We do have Sankle Janko here, but in the headlines, Al Ali is in the news and Real Madrid, I heard, were dealt with. Sankle, tell us about that.
Some of the Real Madrid fans will not be happy with the way you introduce them, but you are right. Al Ali of Egypt, of course, secured a place in the Champions League, CAF Champions League after beating Al Hilal on both legs, aggregate 2-0. In other news also, South Africa's Mamelodi Sundowns also secured a place in the semi-finals of the CAF Champions League, as well as Pyramids of Egypt. But the winner between MC Alger and Orlando Pirates will play against Pyramids of Egypt in the CAF Champions League. Elsewhere, like you said, in the UEFA Champions League, Arsenal produced the shocking results of the night after thrashing holders Real Madrid 3-0 at home. Declan Rice was the hero as he scored a brilliant 2 free kicks before Merino added the third for Arsenal. Inter Milan, of course, also beat Bayern Munich 2-1. And tonight, of course, about 30 minutes from now, Barcelona will take on Borussia Dortmund and Aston Villa will take on PSG. But Real Madrid and Arsenal, that was the talk of them. It was trending.
The Arsenal defeat. It touched my soul here. I mean, the Real Madrid defeat. It's a good one to Arsenal. I mean, for a long time, they've not had this kind of, how would I put it?
Performance.
Yes.
Because, in fact, it was good for football. Some would say for so many neutrals, they felt, the footballing gods were really sleeping yesterday. Because Arsenal played a very wonderful football, and then the results actually matched their
what
performance.
They played. Indeed, that's what we like to see.
It was a nightmare for Real Madrid fans.
So, but for prediction of tonight's match, what are we expecting?
I mean, it's complicated because Paris Saint-Germain are in the form of their life, even though the likes of Kylian Mbappe left. They are doing amazingly well. And they are also playing against a very informed team, and that is Aston Villa from the English Premier League. Yeah. So it's really going to be difficult to predict. But for Barcelona, Borussia Dortmund, I think I'll bet my money on Barcelona to collect the 3 points tonight.
These games are a must-watch for all of you. So we'll get in details tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, that's sports, and a way to conclude Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mam Kodu and Omudanugo for the technical support. Feel free to connect with us on all of our social media platforms, X from the Twitter, Instagram, RWDL News, and Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. I am Imo Edet. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM.